Slouchy Shopper Sew Along. This is the fun bit where we get to put our outer bag and our lining bag together, and it all magically becomes a bag, and we're nearly done. We'll do that attaching the lining bag to the outer bag. We'll attach the corners, and then we'll turn the bag right side out. We'll be sewing up the lining in the bottom. I'll be hand sewing it. I'll be attaching a lovely label onto my inside pocket. We'll be making the leather strap for this version. You'll already have made a detachable strap or the adjustable strap if that's the version you want to make. And we will be finishing the zipper end, so cutting the end of the zipper to the correct length and adding either a metal zipper tab or a fabric zipper tab to it. And that's it. I hope you find this stage as helpful as the others, and I look forward to seeing all your slouchy shoppers made. So I've got my lining bag. I'm going to turn it right sides out. So for the bag it's inside out because the lining should be the way around. I'm just going to make sure my zip is out of the way. So my zipper is open fully and hanging down. Now if you have a preference for a front of the bag and a back of the bag, you may have, make sure you have the side of the pocket facing the back of the bag, if that's the way you'd like it to work. So make sure the hand straps are pointing down into the bag, and we're going to make sure that they're nicely perpendicular as we go around sewing the perimeter. And make sure your strap connectors are pointing down into the bag too, and that the D-rings are pointing down into the bag and not sticking up so that you sew over them. Okay, so I have my outer bag ready and my lining bag ready. So I have no huge preference as to which is the front or the back, but I'm going to go with this is the back and this is the back of my lining, and I'm going to match the sides, the center seams, center notches first, which I can't see the center notch, so I'm going to recheck it by joining up my side seams centered together and then marking my center seam, and I'll stick a pin in it this time. So this fabric is frayed a little bit on me for sure, and just see, I can see my center there, so I know where that is, and I can see it there. So I'm lining up center notch with center notch, and pinning in place, putting my bag and everything, my lining bag inside the outer bag. My handles down into the bag. And I'm going to get the center notch of the top facing and the center notch of the main outer bag. Pin them together. I'm going to get the side seams, and again making sure my D-ring is pointing down into the bag, lining up the side seams on top of each other. I'm happy with that. So I'm not going to be able to pin through all the layers, I just need to pin into the strap there to hold it in place. I'm going to turn around to the other side seam. So what I tend to do is make sure my straps are sitting nice and perpendicular to the top seam, and then I put a pin in either side of the strap. I find that a very useful place to pin the seams. It brings my attention to the fact there's a strap coming, which might be obvious, but it's not always. And it just helps me make sure I know to keep my straps running straight. So you can see there, so that the strap has gone off at an angle, like you wouldn't want to sew it like that. So you do want to make sure that they're running, as I keep saying, at right angles to the main bag, or to the top seam. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. The whole thing is pinned in place, and so now I'm going to sew around the top perimeter with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. So the trickiest physical sewing part of this so again, I'm making sure my D-ring is facing down here in underneath the fabric, but that can be quite bulky. So if you need to hand crank your machine as you go across this, fine. Or if you need to just take it slowly, just judge it as you go along. I should be fine with this machine going across it, but depending on the thickness of your fabric, so the weight of your fabric, the density of your fabric, it might be tricky. So if my zipper, my machine foot tends to sometimes go in under the seam allowance, so I will move that out of the way. Put it back down again. So we're coming to this stitch, the start of the stitches again, so I'm going to just make sure I meet that. Okay. So the next thing to do is so we have 2 jobs to do next. Before we're finally turning the bag right side out, we're going to want to connect these corner seams together. But first things first, I always turn the bag right side out. Now check my top seam, make sure I'm happy with everything before I start kind of the finishing up steps. So let's do that. So straight away I can see a few threads. So that's what I'm going to do first of all, is go around and take out any threads that are not where they should be. So I think that's great. I've 2 jobs to do. One is I need to top stitch this seam, and the other is I need to turn the bag right side out or wrong side out again and connect the corners of the lining and the corners of the main outer bag. So I think I will follow the instructions of the tutorial. There's another thread. And I will do the corners of I'll turn the bag wrong side out again and inside out again, and connect the corners. So I'll do that straight away. But as you can see, I'm quite happy with how that's all sitting there, that top seam. So to keep the lining in place so that it stays sitting down inside your bag, and to just kind of structurally neaten up the bag, you take the bottom corner of the lining and the bottom corner of the outer bag, and you join them up together. Align the seams against each other and pin them in place. And then make sure they're nice and neat and flat against each other. And then within the seam allowance, which we have about the seam allowance, we're going to stitch a line just connecting the two of them together. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't really matter, as long as you're keeping it within the seam allowance. It's just there to hold the two bags together, the lining and the outer. That's one side. Side. And so this step makes it marginally trickier to pull the bags right side out, but it's really quite marginal. It's not essential either. I often don't bother. Actually, what I do is sew that again a little bit closer to the original seam. Okay, and now through the lining. So I have one corner pressed out, and the other corner pressed out, a few threads flying around. And I'm still going to leave the zip as it is. And now the bag is pretty much there. Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the top seam, and I am going to top stitch around it. So I think I'll see what it looks like when I get over to I'm just going to press it. I was thinking about, sometimes when I have a little stripy facing like that, I might deliberately allow the facing to sit up the tiniest bit higher, because you kind of see the stripes sitting perpendicular to the other stripes, and I might do that. See how it looks like when I've pressed it. Okay, so I have that all pressed into place, and as I suspected, I like how my tiny bit of stripe is visible at the top of the facing, so I've deliberately left it sitting ever so slightly proud of the main outer bag. So I'm going to top stitch along that, but I could turn the bag inside out, but I like how it's all quite neat at the moment. I don't want to do that. So as I'm stitching, I'm going to push the outer bag out of the way, the other side of the bag out of the way, and stitch from this side. Just make sure I never catch anything in my stitches. And I'm going to play bobbin roulette, because I know I can't have that much thread left in my bobbin. But we'll see how we go. This fabric's going to be pretty forgiving in terms of ripping stitches, I hope. So I'm going to try and top stitch along this edge of the stripe so that it doesn't go into my white stripe at all. But if I did it there, it might be a bit too much. Maybe I should do it there. No, I'm going to go try and top stitch along there. Let's see how that goes. Oh, I'll find a discreet place to start and stop my top stitching. Somewhere at the back of the bag and close to the side seam, but not right at the side seam. Okay. So my stitch length is set to 3.5 again, and I'll just keep pulling it into place, into shape as I go. If I was using a less forgiving fabric, which is going to kind of hide my top stitching, I would probably use some sort of a hump jumper, which is either a thick piece of fabric that you lift when you're getting close to a tricky area or a thick area. Use another thick piece of fabric or an actual thing called a hump jumper, and you put it in behind your, so that you're at the same level, same thickness, and it makes it much easier to go across that without your stitches getting squished together or dragging out. But I'm going to be okay because I don't think you're really going to see the stitches in this fabric top stitching, because it's matching thread and it's kind of a mottled, you know, there's a texture to the fabric, nearly a pattern to the weave. Now, here we are, back to the start again. Trim my stitches. Those threads. Okay. So we're nearly there. We have our zip inserted, and we just have to finish the end. And we have to make our, so the two things you need to do are finish. So an option is that you could add another layer of stitches to reinforce the strap handles and the hand straps rather, and the strap connector positions. We need to finish the end of the zip, and we need to close the lining in the bottom of the bag, and we need to make our leather strap. So we're going to start, I think, with making a leather strap for the bag. Okay, next up we're going to add the leather strap. So we need the strap and matching connectors. So this looks to me like it's 1 inch, which it is. Yep, and these are 1 inch connectors. So it's very simple. I'm only going to put one rivet in these. At the start I said I didn't know if I was going to put one or two, but I think one rivet is plenty in that 1 inch width. I'm going to add one, and first I'm going to trim this back, and I'm going to trim it at an angle, so not quite 45 degrees, but a slight angle that's a very deliberate angle, so that I'm not trying to be perfectly square, and that's easier than trying to be perfectly square and being ever so slightly off. I just like a little angle on the end of the leather. So I will get my little cutting mat, and I think my little timber ruler will be handy enough for this. And my rotary blade will do the job nicely. So as I said, I'm just going to go off a little bit off okay. So I'm going to do one side first, then I'm going to check the length, see what I'm happy with, and then I'm going to do the other side. So I think I'll leave it nice and long off the end. I'm going to punch my hole in the middle. So I have my two tools that I need. One is for setting my rivets. Close that and put it away for a minute. And the other is for punching my holes. So I thread it through, and I'm going to mark using my rivet to make the best judgment I can. I'm going to keep it close enough to the top and mark the location there. Make a little mark with my actual rivet. I'm happy with that. I'm going to use that as guide for where I cut my holes, and I'm going to cut the two holes together at the same time. I have the correct hole cutter set on the rivet, on the hole puncher. Move the tiniest bit over to that side. I think it's not quite bang on center. Only the tiniest bit. And then just squeeze. Okay. Now, so that's that. I've got the two ends of my rivets. I find because I'm working with imperfect tools, I have the correct die on this end, but I don't have the correct die on this end. So I want that's gonna mark my fabric a little bit. So I'm going to put this cap through from the good side, and then this cap on the other side. Sometimes if you squeeze too hard, you'll get a little mark on this cap. It's more likely than it is going to happen on this side. So I'll do all my goods. So the correct die I'm going to put on that side, and this die here. So you just squeeze it firmly until you can kind of hear it crumple. The little stick that's running through from one cap to the other will kind of crumple a little bit. Yeah, so I just felt that. So you can see my little mark, that'll disappear in this leather after a while anyway. And there we are. So that's one side done. So now I'll grab my bag, and I'm going to thread the swivel hook onto the strap. And I'm going to size this on for myself. I think I'd like this to be a crossbody length, not actually just a shoulder strap. So I'm going to make it a little bit longer than the tutorial calls up, because that's what I'd like for this bag. And when I've done it, and I'll measure it and I'll tell you what it is. So let me just try that on now. So that's the length that I'm happy with. And I will write a caption as to what it is. So I'm going to just mark it with my finger even there. Take it out of I can see my little mark, and I'm going to cut that at an angle. I'm not hugely worried about it being exactly the same as the other one because you're never going to know. My extra bit of leather. We get a pair of hand straps out of that. And now thread that back in. Now I will line them up to make sure that I have them roughly the same length, so that looks right. Okay, so they're the same length. And I'm going to do the same thing, which is using my rivet caps. Just make sure that I have them roughly the same depth away from the swivel hook. I just like to use the rivet cap so I can get a feeling of what it's going to look like at the end with the width, the thickness of the cap on it as well. So pretty happy with that depth away from the that depth there away from the so it's not very centered, so I'll center it now when I okay. So again, I'm going to put the good rivet on that side and the extra cap on that side. And so there we are. That's my leather strap made. The next thing I'll do is I'm going to decide what length to cut the end of my zip off at, and then I'm going to add this lovely little thing on it, which is a zip end, and that sits in, basically you fold the zip in on itself. The zip would be trimmed off, but I'll leave that be for the moment. And there's a little screw in there, which I'm going to have to take out. Anyway, you slip that over the top and then you screw the screw back in, and there you are, the zip end is done. But you can also make a little fabric end, so we'll go through that as well. But I'm going to do this on my actual bag first. So I don't have a screwdriver that's small enough, but I know from experience that this sharp knife does the job, which so unscrew the screw. Now this can disappear very easily. It's actually stuck to my knife there, so I'll just leave it there stuck to my knife. Now let's make a judgment on the length of the zip. So what I want to do is make sure that my bag can open fully, comfortably fully, when the zip is fully open. So I pulled it back there. I think that zip needs to be at least that long. So I'm going to add a little bit because I like it to kind of hang down into the bag most of the time. So I think where I have the pin there is fine, which I'll tell you now is about about 12, yeah, about 12.5 centimeters, about 5 inches from the end of the zipper, the side strip. So I'm going to cut that off. And I'm going to I'm just going to fold those over. Okay, with that. Now, you could put a lump of glue on that as well to help, but I've never had it come off with just the screw. Do you know what? I should probably burn that, melt that. Okay, so make sure you're happy that it's nice, kind of a neat, folded into a neat triangle. Just push that on as far as you can. It's nice and neat. And then the tiniest screw in the world. So this is akin to using your fabric scissors on paper. My mother would be horrified at me using a good sharp knife, because this actually is quite a good knife to do anything like this. But I haven't got a tiny screwdriver, and I haven't got any other way to do it. It's nearly in fully. Now, so that's a super neat way of doing it. And that zip end will just hang inside the bag most of the time. But it's not too long. Okay, so that's great. What I'll do now is I will cut out a little zip end piece, and I will attach it to the other bit of zip, just as for demonstration purposes. Okay, so we're going to sew a fabric zipper end for the zipper as well. I've attached my metal zipper end, but they can't always be easy to get. So this piece of fabric it's a number 5 zipper, which is about 35 millimeters wide, which is about 1.5 inches, just under 1.5 inches wide zipper. So I've cut my fabric 6.5 centimeters by 11 centimeters long. And what that will do is that you can wrap it around the end of the zipper, and the fabric goes from the side of the actual zipper teeth to the side of the zipper teeth like that. Okay, so that's why it's 6.5 centimeters wide. So if you have a narrower zipper, you need to get a piece of fabric that you can wrap around from zipper teeth to zipper teeth. Okay, that makes sense? So we'll start by lining it up with the zipper, the right side of the zipper tape facing you and centered on that fabric, and fold in those sides. Okay, and then I'm going to sew that with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Going carefully over the teeth, and obviously with metal teeth, you have to be super careful. I do still sew over metal teeth, but I would always hand crank over them so that the needle can find its way down. But that's a bit tricky. Okay. So then I pull the tape around to the right side. Okay. And then I'm going to press that, go over, and I'm going to press that flat. Okay. Okay. So I have a couple of threads I will pull out. So that's been pressed flat. So what we're going to do then is just turn the corners in and sew across them. And I'm going to press them as well, but I'll just sew across them now. And then I'll press them after the fact. Okay, so like that. I'll just press that to keep it neat. Okay. So I've pressed that. Now I'm going to fold the zipper end in and fold again. So this is quite a square zipper end. If you were to make it this much shorter, you would have it, you could make a shorter zipper end. But I'm quite happy with that. Okay. So the only place you could see a tiny bit of seam of edge of thread is in there at the corners. But really it's very, very marginal. So if you just pull your out of the top fabric over the tiniest bit more to conceal that, that would be great. But you do need to sew this from the top because you need to hold these in place, so I don't think you could really pin them successfully. Well, maybe you could. So I'm going to start here and stitch around with a, oh, seems to be a thread flying around there. Oh, it's just that. And then top stitch around that in a square. Sure everything is sitting on top of itself as much as you can. Okay, so it's a lovely neat zipper end. So instead of that zipper end, you could have that zipper end there, which looks, I don't know, pretty cool as well. The last thing I'll be doing is hand sewing the lining close. Sorry, the second last thing I'll do, because before I started making this bag, I found a little label in my stash. You make my dreams come true, the sewing machine. It's an artist collaborated with Kai and the machine to make these labels. I can't remember her name. I'll check that out now and put it in the notes. Anyway, I think it's a lovely label with this bag. So I'm going to hand sew it on. I had intended placing it just here somewhere, but I think the advantage of hand sewing in at the end, I might put it there, maybe over one stripe. Just there. I think that's a nice place for it. So I'm just gonna hand sew in the 4 corners in maybe a brown thread, that kind of rusty brown thread. Let's see what I have. I'm happy with that position. I could pin it in place or I could glue it in place, but I'm just going to sew one corner and then I'll sew the other, and then I can adjust it. So I'll go in behind and just get the thread in to the right place. Secure a couple of stitches. I'm going to stay within the thickness of this fabric only. I'm not going to stitch through to the other side, though I don't think it would really matter. Just position that. I'm just going to do, I'd say 4 or 5 stitches at the corner with a nice big, relatively big stitch. Make sure they're all evenly tight. It's just a matter of time before my eyesight makes this a bit tricky. At the moment it's okay. Okay, so there's that. Now I'm going to across the inside of the fabric to roughly the same place on this side. Make sure it's sitting neatly along with the top of that. Pick the same spot there, that'll do. One more. Okay, and then go down. Keep in line with the stripe. Okay, and I'm going between the 2 layers of fabric, and I'm going to just come up somewhere around there, around the bottom corner. Okay. right?
My alarm went to collect my children, so that's just about the right time for me to finish up here. One more.
Now, go in there and make sure that's right. Okay, I'm just going to secure a couple of stitches in here where you can't see. And trim. Now, right, that's gorgeous. Lovely label. Okay, nearly there at the end, so we will sew up the hole in the lining. Pin that lining in place together, and then see, one of my creases survived, the other crease didn't so well, so I'm just going to hand press that, finger press that into place, pin my seam together. So there's no reason why you shouldn't just top stitch along this to secure it, but I do like doing a bit of hand stitching at the end, and I like how it effectively becomes an invisible stitch. So I'm going to use a ladder stitch to sew along there. I'm going to get the matching thread to that fabric. So being right-handed, I nearly always sew from right to left. So I tend to secure it in I don't want to go through there at all. I'll secure it in on the seam allowance inside, you'll never see it. And then I will go into the fabric and come up just here, just beside the last stitch of the machine stitching. Just there. Okay. And now I'll pinch closed the fabric, and I'm going to go in on the crease of the seam directly opposite where I came out, and do a stitch and come out on the same side, and then I'm going to go in directly opposite where I came out again, and I'm going to work my way across like that, and as I pull the stitches each time, they'll end up closing up totally as we go along.
to the end here now. And I'm coming out in the middle of the seam here, and to secure it on this side I'm going to do a few little little stitches kind of right in the center of that seam. You don't really see it, but it's catching into something somewhere, and then I'll end up just out further away and trimming it off. That is pretty neat. So I can go back down the bottom of the bag.